Welcome to the Spirit Soul Series podcast. And today we're going to start a new chapter, I think, the eighth chapter, right?
Yes, yes,
Eighth
yes, yes.
chapter. So thank you for coming on Supriya Chechi again, and your
Thank,
extensive knowledge of the Gita will definitely illuminate all of us.
thank you,
Yeah,
Kannan.
yeah.
It's a pleasure to be back every week. Thanks to your diligence and your able to accommodate despite your schedule. Jai
It's
Shri
all because yeah, it's all because of the wonderful conversations that we have. So that brings me back, and we're talking about Krishna all the time. So,
Sure, sure.
uh,
And it's
yeah.
and also Jai Srila Prabhupada and Hare
Yes,
Krishna
Srila
because
Prabhupada. Right.
yeah, is in this chapter 8. It's again like remember we talked about how starting from chapter 7 we are getting into the heart of the Bhagavad Gita. And like the analogy of the book, that the first 6 chapters that give information about karma, that's like the outer cover of the book. The last 6 chapters from 12 to 18 that give information about gyan, about the world in general and how things work. That's like the back cover, and the real meat of it or the real substance is inside the middle 6 chapters. And it's also like a jewel case with the top lid and the lower half and the jewels inside. Now chapter 7 itself was like that because we got this, we were told of the 4 types of people, who the 4 types who do turn to Krishna and the 4 types who don't turn to Krishna, so we could place ourselves. Now in chapter 8, like you see the
So
title,
look
Attaining
at
the Supreme.
the first question itself is like, what is Brahman?
Yeah, that's
That's the
right.
first question.
Yeah, Arjuna is
Yeah,
inquiring. Yeah, but if you once we get past these
yeah.
questions with the technical names, this whole chapter, Attaining the Supreme, is about the final moments in a person's life and how one must prepare for it and how plan for it, and how even if it comes suddenly, and basically how important they are in determining our next destination. So attaining the Supreme here means in an ultimate and final sense how to get back home and get back to him, what we need to do or at least to be aware of to attain the Supreme. So in chapter 7 it was about turning to the Supreme, turning in that direction after many lifetimes, in different bodies, the jiva with the super soul sitting next to him like two birds on a tree. Finally certain things happen, either you're in distress or you're lack of wealth or you're inquisitive or you really want knowledge of the Supreme or a combination of these, and then you turn to the Supreme. But here it is attaining the Supreme. So this is really meaning in a lasting sense in the way of Ajamil, and we have so many other examples the Bhagavatam gives us to caution us and to inspire us. So attaining the Supreme here is telling us categorically, after Krishna has answered a few questions from Arjuna, important the information and the distinctions they make. But starting from about text 5, text 6, text 7, text, they are completely about at the Antakale or in the final moments. A Prayana Kale, these are the terms that come. Prayana really means the journey. And here they are talking about the journey of the departure of the soul, the journey of the soul across bodies, telling us categorically that depending on your mental state or your consciousness and what you focus your mind on in the final stage, that is going to determine your next destination or the next body you get in the next set of circumstances you get. And just like in a exam, if there is an exam coming and you don't study at all during the year as the course is being completed, and suddenly the date of the exam is announced and you sit and mug and study, you still, it's extremely unlikely you're going to do well. Some fluke, some stroke of luck you may get through. So similarly, life's final exam is this test that comes at the end. It can come without much prior warning, or if you are fortunate enough to be long lived, then all the signs are there, old age and disease set in, and you have repeated, you're rushed to the hospital a few times and then so on. And finally the soul makes its departure. So here, that is it. He's giving us fascinating information in the verses we are going to look at today, which is I think we'll only be able to do first 7-8 verses, or first 10 maximum. But in the later part of this chapter, you're even told, depending on the time of the day and the time of the year, and which part of the month, the bright half or the dark half, according to the moon's movement, the waxing and waning of the moon, when you make your departure, where you're going to go. Are you going to go upwards? Are you going to go downwards? Are you going to come back to the middle planets? This is all really spelled out here for us. The first, we look at what Arjuna is asking. Arjuna inquired, would you like to read that? The first verse?
Yeah. So Arjuna inquired, O my Lord, O Supreme Person, what is Brahman? What is the self? What are fruitive activities? What is this material manifestation? And what are the demigods? Please explain the story.
Okay, so here, if we look at the Sanskrit of the verse, Kim Tat Brahma. Remember, you were talking a little earlier about an exchange you were having with a friend of yours, and Kim Tat Brahma. So here, Kim Adhyatma, Kim Karma. Karma we've heard so many times it can't be difficult. And then what is Adi Bhutam and what is Adi Daivam? So here, Brahma, this is a crucial point about all scripture. The same word, especially certain crucial words, can have different meanings according to the context in which it's used. So Atma, which we usually refer to talk about the soul, can also mean the mind, it can also mean the body, and in exceptional cases, it can mean the senses. So one has to follow the purport and follow the commentaries and the translation carefully to understand what's being referred to here. Now, similarly, Brahma, normally we say Aham Brahmasmi, it means that we are spirits, so we are spiritual. I am spirit soul, I'm not the body. Of Brahma, as in the foremost of the demigods and Brahma Loka and so on, that's someone else we're talking about. And Brahma can also mean the Supreme Lord himself, basically, because then we are actually talking about Para Brahma. Depending on the language. In Malayalam, it will end with an N. Here it is Brahma. So here also Brahma. There it says Brahman. Kim Tat Brahma, Kim Adhyatma. So Brahma and Atma we are taking care of. Now Kim Adhyatma, here Adhyatma actually refers to a swabhav or a spiritual nature. And Adi Bhutam refers to just the material nature. Adi Daivam refers to the universal form. So instead of getting caught up in all these technical details, we should let us just focus on Adi Daivam, or here of course the word for word translation is given as the demigods, but later when you follow the purport and the commentaries, you would see that the demigods are all placed within the universal form, and they are part of the Lord's body, and they are the Lord's body himself. It's like in the bigger picture, they are departmental heads and they have different duties to do. So here again, Brahma, as I said, here it says Brahman, Adhyatma, the self, karma, fruitive activities. Karma also can mean action, or it can mean reactions that you're getting. Fruitive activities actually mean actions, your prescribed duties according to your nature. But karma is often also used to talk about the reaction that you're getting for actions that you've already done. Purushottam, Supreme Person. Adi Bhutam, the material nature or the material manifestation. And finally, Adi Daivam, translated here as demigods but universal form. Let's just look at what the purport has to say. Can you please read? It's a short 2 paragraphs in this chapter. Yeah.
Yeah. So in this chapter, Lord Krishna answers different questions from Arjuna, beginning with what is Brahman. The Lord also explains karma, devotional service, and yoga principles, and devotional service in its pure form. The Srimad Bhagavatam explains that the Supreme Absolute Truth is known as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. In addition, the living entity, the individual soul, is also called Brahman. Arjuna also inquires about Atma, which refers to the body, soul, and mind. According to the Vedic dictionary, Atma refers to the mind, soul, body, and senses also.
So the context is important, otherwise we can miss the meaning. It has different meanings in different circumstances. Yeah. Arjuna.
And Arjuna has addressed the Supreme Lord as Purushottama, Supreme Person, which means that he was putting these questions not simply to a friend, but to the Supreme Person, knowing him to be the Supreme Authority, able to give definitive answers.
All right. Now, in the very second verse, the remaining 2 questions also get asked, and then the answers start coming from Sri Bhagavan from the 3rd verse. Look at the second verse.
Second
Yeah.
verse. Okay. So second verse is who is the Lord of sacrifice and how does he live in the body, O Madhusudana? And how can those engaged in devotional service know you at the time of death?
Okay, who is the Lord of sacrifice? That's really coming straight from the Sanskrit in that verse, Adi Yajna. So, Yagya
Hmm.
or Yajna is sacrifice. Adi, the Lord, the highest and the root of all the sacrifices. It's a reference to God Himself, to the Supreme Lord. Katham
Hmm.
Kotra Dehesmin Madhusudana. How does the Supreme Lord actually live within this body? Prayana Kalecha Katham Nyeyo Nyatatmabhi. This last question, how are those engaged in devotional service to know you at the time of death, is the most important of all these questions. I guess Prayana Kale, the Prayana Kale actually means at the time of death, but I was listening to a lecture where Prayana also means the journey. When the journey, so here the journey is referring to the journey of the soul at the time of departure when the soul has to exit the body. So this last question is what Krishna, of course, answers the other questions, but the last question is what he picks up and he elaborates on in verses 5 and 6. So here, why are we being told about the universal form? Or we've already heard about the universal form in the Bhagavatam. We will hear about it in chapter in the coming chapters. In chapter 10, you will we heard it mentioned the universal form earlier. So what is a universal form? It is a conceptual device for a neophyte. It is a conceptual tool, because it means that for a neophyte, if they are have a sense of God and of the power of God and have some awe and reverence, when they see the power of nature around them, that for them to make the connection with an actual Supreme Lord, the Lord has very kindly given us this conceptual device or tool of the universal form or the Virata Rupa, which actually displays to Arjuna later, where wherein different aspects of nature are to be seen in this his giant form. Therefore, the mountains that we see around us are his bones, and the rivers that we may get attracted to, or we see torrential rainfall and the rivers cascading, are meant to be like the veins in his body. The trees are his hair. The sun and moon, if you like a sunset and sunrise, or you like the moon at night, you somewhere, if someone tells you that the sun and the moon are actually the two eyes of the Supreme Lord, for a neophyte, it helps him or her get started on identifying that power that he senses or that he is in awe of with a supreme person. So that's the reason for the universal form. And the rest of it, as I said, karma, we've already discussed many times. The Adi Yagya, that's the Lord of sacrifice. Okay, there's an important clarification coming in the purport to the second verse. Purport to the second verse, if you read here, Lord of sacrifice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lord of sacrifice may refer to either Indra or Vishnu. Vishnu is the chief of the primal demigods, including Brahma and Shiva, and Indra is the chief of the administrative demigods. Both Indra and Vishnu are worshipped by Yagna performances. But here Arjuna asks who is actually the Lord of Yagna and how the Lord is residing within the body of the living entity.
Okay, so Indra is in charge of a whole set of demigods, but Indra has no control over Shiva and Brahma. Shiva and Brahma in another, they are primal demigods and they are directly under Vishnu. So therefore, it's like to clarify in case there is some confusion between Indra and the position of Indra and the position of Vishnu or Krishna, that this question is asked, and clearly the Lord of Sacrifice or Adi Yajna is very much Krishna himself. Arjuna addresses the Lord as Madhusudan because Krishna once killed a demon called Madhu. And whenever whenever Arjuna is confused and has lots of doubts, he uses this term. It's like making a request that just as he killed the demon Madhu, could he kindly kill the demonic or the doubts that keeps
Hmm.
bringing up in his mind. That's the connection. Now, the last paragraph here for this verse, if you like to read, now the word Prayanakale.
Yeah. Now the word Prayanakale in this verse is very significant because whatever we do in life will be tested at the time of death. Arjuna is very anxious to know of those who are constantly engaged in Krishna consciousness. What should be their position at the final moment? At that final moment. At the time of death, all the bodily functions are disrupted, and the mind is not in a proper condition. Thus, disturbed by the bodily situation, one may not be able to remember the Supreme Lord. Maharaj Kulashekara, a great devotee, prays, "My dear Lord, just now I am quite healthy, and it is better that I die immediately, so that the swan of my mind can seek entrance at the stem of your lotus feet." The metaphor is used because the swan, a bird of the water, takes pleasure in digging into the lotus flower. Its sporting proclivity is to enter the lotus flower. Maharaj Kulashekara says to the Lord, "Now my mind is undisturbed and I am quite happy. If I die immediately, thinking of your lotus feet, then I am sure that my performance of your devotional service will become perfect. But if I have to wait for my natural death, then I do not know what will happen, because at that time the bodily function will be disrupted. My throat will be choked up, and I do not know whether I shall be able to chant your name. Better let me die immediately, Arjuna." Arjuna asked how a person can fix his mind on Krishna's lotus feet at such a time.
Okay, so here this extraordinary prayer by Kulashekar, he is being referred to as Maharaj Kulashekar. Understand, this is the Alvar saint, Kulashekar Alvar. So great is his devotion that he is making this extraordinary prayer that he wants his mind to get entangled in the lotus feet, at the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, in the same way that a swan, which has a very long neck, it has a particular way of moving its neck and its beak to hunt out different creatures that it can find for it. And it's said that it hunts at the base of the lotus plant because there is some special sweet tasting fluid or liquid it can suck out. So the way its head gets entangled amongst the thick stems which go underwater of the lotus stem. Similarly, Kulashekar Alvar is asking for the same thing to happen to him, to his mind, in so that he can die remembering the Lord. In fact, he's literally asking for his death to be fast forwarded or preponed, because now he is. See how realistic this prayer is. I don't know from which period this is coming, how many years ago, that at the time of
Mm.
death, there will be so many impediments or obstacles. And if you've been with elderly people dying, passing away, you realize this like a death rattle, the phlegm keeps. Of course, you've had a grandmother living with you who passed away after a lot of illness. So you must know, there are so many obstacles that it's very difficult to bring the mind to rest on the Lord. Really very difficult. So then the question arises, what happens to those, how then to prepare for this? That's why it's called the final exam or the final test. Because if you have made it your business to always again and again bring your mind back to the Supreme Lord, or to think about the Supreme Lord, no matter what you might be doing, then at the time of death, automatically, like a reflex action, the mind will go back, even if there are so many obstacles and so much suffering and misery. Now, there are cautionary tales that we are told. Like, for example, like Kulashekar Alvar, we remember Ajamil, the story of
Mm.
Ajamil in the Bhagavatam, the story of Bharat Maharaj in the Bhagavatam, because he failed to think of the Lord at the time of his death and instead thought with affection of the deer, he ended up in the body of a deer. So it really means that what you think of with great attachment in that miserable condition with phlegm and mucus, you may not have much thoughts of affection, but still the attachment, these strong bonds of attachment. So the trick is, it seems, to develop and keep on developing those strong bonds of attachment to the Lord, because then that pulls you somehow, no matter what mistakes you've made, back towards the.
Yeah, because what happens very easily is that your mind, like, you may be into the practice and you'll be doing it for a while, and then after some time, like, your mind can get very easily disturbed by even a very small thing, and like so it's like um the importance. I think the importance is that you're always thinking about your death. Like, everything is like leading up to that. Like, as they say, end game. Like, they say the word end game. It's all
Yeah,
leading
yeah.
up to the end game, the end of your life, where when you're about to die, what is the thought that you're going to have at the time of death? Is it going to be about Krishna? or whatever is it. Like it's always said in the Gita that whatever you think in the end of your whatever your last thoughts are, you that's where you will go to, like ultimately.
Mm,
So if you like, but that's it's a very easy thing, like okay, like so that means that a lot of people will may take that and say that okay, I'll live my life like this, and then when the time of death is supposed to come, then I'll just
correct,
tell somebody that okay, just remind me to think of Krishna now. But that doesn't work that way, because even if somebody told you also, your mind will again get distracted immediately, because
correct.
you haven't practiced the mind to think of Krishna at the time of death. Your mind is like it's full of other things, and then when the time of death comes, there's so much of like regret and like, oh, I should have said this, I should have said that, I should have done this, I should have done that, and then you realize that you may not have like focused on the right thing, like
The
you may
regret
not have,
is a very
yeah,
you've hit the date on the nail on the head. This regret is a very powerful emotion in end of life situations, and unfortunately, it's a great impediment towards thinking of your Ishtadevata or the Supreme Lord. Regret definitely. Now, some people might argue, those who studied the Bhagavatam and who've been practicing devotees may say, well, look at Ajamil. Initially he was a devotee, but then he got completely captivated by this prostitute and cohabited with her and had so many children and so on. And then when the Yamadutas come for him, he remembers his son of the same. At least he had the foresight to name
name
his youngest son, I
name his
think. Yeah,
son
Narayan.
Narayan.
Yeah.
Narayan.
So the counter argument that's given is he did not go back immediately to Godhead just because he called
Hmm.
the Narayan name. Yes, it is true the Yamadutas packed up and went back, but the Vishnu Dutas also went back, and he was given a second chance. He was given another 12 years of life to perfect his bhakti, and in one sense to undo whatever he had done wrong earlier. And not only that, it seems that earlier, when he was a proper devotee of the Lord, he used to chant the name of the Lord with great affection, not in a ritualistic way, not with the hope that it can counteract his karma, get him rewards, not in that mentality, with pure affection. And ultimately, when the Yamadutas come for him and he wakes up to his plight, he again chants the name of the Lord with great helplessness. So both these sentiments are apparently are rare. Therefore, they guarantee that he gets a second chance. But it's important to remember that it's not as if he straightaway went back to the planet of the Lord. He was given a second chance. He was given 12 more years to perfect his bhakti. So that is a rare case, and as you correctly pointed out, you can't just say I will do what I like for the most part of my life, and when death occurs like Ajamila, I'll suddenly start remembering. It won't work like that at all. What's more, the famous example, which is often told in ISKCON circles by the speaker himself, Sureshwar Das. He's a proper disciple. He must be now in his late 70s. Sometime in his 50s, he joined in his 20s. He was one of those early Prabhupada disciples, an American, married, grown up daughter, and so on. But practicing very carefully and very nicely, always living in devotee communities. In some situation, they were bathing in the sea, the ocean, beach. I don't know where it was, but he started to drown, and he started to drown, and what happened was something, he was a good swimmer, but the current was too strong, and I think one side of him was saying, what you mean, this is going to be my end, I am going to wash up on the shore like some miserable cheap tourist, who doesn't know better and drinks or drugs and then goes and drowns. Is that my fate? One side of him. The other side, and he said this was what was so alarming, instead of thinking about the Lord in case really this were his last moments, what actually came to his mind was an advertisement jingle, because the water and the waves brought up in his mind some very captivating advertisement which he had seen several times at some stage in his life. Like for those of us, like my generation, we who grew up in the 70s as teenagers, there was this Liril. Karen Lunel was a famous, now she's an old plump woman. But Karen Lunel was this slim, uh, um, attractive, not particularly beautiful model, and the Liril fresh green color soap. It was Lintas was the advertising agency. I know because my dad's brother was working for them. It was a
Okay.
huge hit. When we went into movie screen, this Lyrill ad, there's a waterfall and this bikini clad Karen Lunel would come and just bathe under the and then just vanish. And there was some la 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 kind of. So that jingle, even today, sometimes I look it up to hear it because they very cleverly captured an image of utter freshness and how do you say natural freshness and joy and a sensation of like you're free of all your aches and pains. And so this is the other very big danger, that there is no telling what will pop out of your head because his impressions are lying there. And Suresha Prabhu says, of course he survived that to tell the tale and he lived and he's still alive today. He says we don't know what has sunk in that memory bank of the brain and what is actually going to come up. So it's not going to be easy for any of us to really remember the Lord at the time of death, whether we have a lot of warning or not. So there's only one way around it, which actually at the end of this section he says, Mam Anusmara Yudhyacha, no matter what you're doing, you may be fighting Yuddham, Yudhya, as in Arjuna's case, but just remember me and do it. Remember me and be a computer scientist. Remember me and be a teacher. Remember me and go shopping. Remember. So because death can occur at any time. That's the
And the interesting thing is actually like when Krishna says that remember me when you're doing these things.
yeah.
Actually, it's not that remembrance is actually kind of a byproduct of the practice that you do. Like if you are constantly like in the like if you have a practice that you do in the morning or in the night where you're chanting Hare Krishna or you're doing something like that, then automatically what will happen is that like I mean when you and with that devotional sort of spirit or whatever, when you
Yeah.
are doing any of your activity automatically like at various instances throughout your like activities you will remember Krishna. Like there's
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
there's no there's no way that you can't, because if you put that much of your mind and interest into it, then naturally like when you're doing something it will come without you
It
even
will be
realizing it
natural
also,
without
because
any
it will be
artificial
there.
effort.
Like
Yeah.
every day if you make the effort to like okay, morning I'm going to chant Hare Krishna and then night I'm going to chant Hare Krishna, there's definitely like when you're doing some activity that will also come into the activity, that because you're doing it every day, that thought will come into whatever activity you're doing. So then you don't have to like take so much effort there. You just have to make the effort to practice. Just chant like Hare Krishna in the morning and that's it. And then throughout the day you just remember, and then you can live your life that way. Like, you don't have to worry too much about anything else.
Yeah. And what you are saying is the importance of sadhana or spiritual practice.
Sadhana, sadhana.
Yeah, sadhana, however limited it may be, it may not take up many hours, but to do that so regularly, you're very right that sadhana is meant to remember Krishna. So if that sadhana is in place and you're doing it unfailingly, like you say, you have a different kind of work schedule now because you have a new job and you're forced to adjust, but you still, before you start the podcast, you make sure that you do your basic practices, you try to complete. So that's very crucial, really, because it's the sadhana that helps us to remember the Lord. And as you said, if the sadhana is be getting done every day, half an hour, 1 or 2 hours, whatever, then the other things that we do also, that same sadhana time remembrance of the Lord can infiltrate or intrude into the other things that we are doing and help us to remember the Lord. That's
Because
100%
I
correct.
I
Yeah.
feel like, many times like I'll be in like a like a let's say a tough situation or something like that and all that, and I'll be like, whether it's at work or something like that, and then I'll be just sitting there like, okay, and then suddenly I'll just, the thought of Krishna will just come from nowhere, and
Uh-huh.
then the mind gets a bit relaxed and it becomes calm, and then I'll be like, okay, I just need to take 2 minutes to just meditate for like 2 minutes, and then I'll meditate for 2 minutes, and then mind becomes at ease. Like I'm able, like
Mm-hmm.
I'm not mastered this yet, but I would say I'm beginning to maybe realize something where like I'm able to like take a negative experience and then understand that it's different. Like this is like I that that this is very temporary and it needs to be detached from my mind and put to the
Uh-huh.
side.
Uh-huh.
So like if I'm going through a negative experience, I'll immediately do some kind of meditation. And then for that moment I can like detach that negative experience, put it on the side, think of Krishna for some time. And then the minute I stop doing it, when I stop the meditation, that thing is like the negative feeling is almost detached. Like it's not
Uh-huh.
there anymore. So I'm not, it doesn't come naturally, but I do this like I've been doing this a lot recently where every time I have a negative experience, I do this. And it's very helpful if you're able to like detach yourself from all the negative experiences
So
and just focus on what it is.
does that help you to control anger or
Yeah,
like outburst reaction,
yeah.
especially in workplaces, often
So
things don't go our way.
yeah, yeah, like all the like negative feelings like anger, whatever be anger, lust, envy,
Patient getting
jealousy.
provoked.
Yeah,
Huh.
yeah. All these feelings what happen the minute I feel like it's coming, I'll just be like, okay, I need to do at least 2 minutes of meditation now. Because I'll do a 2 minute meditation, and then for a minute, I can like just for that minute, I can kind of separate that negative feeling from. I can separate the negative feeling because I'm thinking of Krishna in that time. So the minute I'm thinking of Krishna, what happens? What happens is that I'm not thinking about the negative feeling now.
Hmm.
It's almost like you're in this eye of the storm, and then suddenly, like for a brief moment, like when everything is chaotic, for a brief moment, there's like silence. Everything is fine,
Right,
and
right.
then so
Okay.
then in that moment you can there's some clarity, like you realize, oh, everything is fine now. And so when you're back in the storm, you're not so disturbed by it, like you're not so worried about
So you're
it.
really saying you're able to step back from that situation. Yeah, and
Yeah,
not just step back, you're using another powerful tool like remembering Krishna to drown out whatever were the irritating factors a little while earlier. And then when you
yeah,
come back to that situation, there is clarity. Is that what you're just
yeah,
said?
yeah,
Okay. Oh, that's great. But the tips that I got from my Shiksha Guru, the late Purnachandra Swami, was when you're faced with a problem. Of course, I don't mean a problem where, like in a workplace, where you may get provoked very easily. For that, your method is the best. Excuse me, to step back and to think
hmm,
about the Lord and then to return with clarity. In my case, what he said was if there's a major problem, somebody is behaving very funnily, maybe a relative, maybe, we don't know what to make of it. He would say, just sit down and break up the problem and analyze the different elements of the problem. you know then he would say sift and see which are the more important issues, elements in the problem, and that way start tackling. Some can be tackled by this one person, the other bit maybe you alone have to tackle. So he also taught in one way to not be overwhelmed by the problem, to basically sit and break it apart like children take apart a toy. They break it apart and see what are the most important elements. So this about death again, like we discussed about the case of Sureshwar Prabhu, who says having practiced for many years, always there for Mangalarti in a temple, always doing what Srila Prabhupada asked him to, didn't really guarantee when he was suddenly found himself drowning in the ocean. Now he says it was a good wake up call for him, and like a wake up call, it shook him up, and he then decided to find a service in some way to churn his feelings for Krishna and for Prabhupada more. So he hit upon this course that he developed. It was called Srila Prabhupada Founder Acharya, and to increase, and now he travels around. Right now, his health is not good, but otherwise he was based in Hawaii. He's an American, and then other parts of America, North America. So he developed this course, got the backing of ISKCON's top brass to go to. He even came to Trivandrum to teach this course, to create awareness amongst devotees about the role of Srila Prabhupada as the founder of the movement. Because what can happen is when a movement grows, there are many, many new sannyasis, there are many, many new centers, new people who come. Of course, they read Prabhupada's books, but they are focusing more on the sannyasi or the guru they see in front of them. There is a great danger of relegating Prabhupada, the founder of all this, and his struggles and the remarkable kind of challenges he faced in old age to set it up. It's very easy to relegate. So this is his way of paying back, and of Sureshwar Prabhu's dasas, and he's of increasing his own and let's say decreasing the risk of forgetting Krishna at the time of death. So different people tackle it differently. There was another, around the time I came to ISKCON, this is 2001 to, there was a famous Prabhupada disciple who did a lot and who was one of the rare people who had the courage to speak out again, speak up in Prabhupada's presence. He would flatly refuse to do certain things. He would refuse to give up a certain service and move. So Prabhupada would have to trick him into it in an affectionate way. You know, for example, Prabhupada, he was this Tamal Krishna Maharaj, Tamala Krishna Goswami was his name, American again, highly educated, long face with was supposed to be a tough taskmaster. So those who worked under him often say he was just too tough. My Shiksha Guru Purnachandra Swami also got trained by him initially. So what Prabhupada would do with this Tamal Krishna Goswami, and I'm coming to the circumstances in which Tamal Krishna Goswami himself died. That's why I'm telling you this story. Prabhupada, he did a very successful book distribution program in America where some 5-6 members of ISKCON would get into a book van and just drive to a town, park their van, do some cooking there. Tamal Krishna Goswami would go and give a lecture in the local. Those days it was all very easy. You didn't have to get anyone's permission. Sell a lot of books, put whole sets of the Bhagavatam into the libraries and the schools and the colleges and whatnot. Move on to the next. So it became a huge success. And he was more and more people, when he would go into a particular ISKCON temple and say, he would be asked to give the lecture. And he became so daring, he would steal away temple inmates who, because they got so inspired about the adventurousness and the thrill of the success of this program, they would just quit their temple and say, we are also coming in the van. So it became, you can say, conflict point, but in a very interesting and dynamic and transcendental way, because temple presidents started complaining to Prabhupada. This particular devotee disciple of yours comes to our temple. It's true, he's doing great things. He just takes away people whom we need to run our temple, like that. So finally, Prabhupada realized, either out of his wisdom, that Tamal Krishna Goswami might become proud or might become too attached to the success that he was getting. So he made a plan to move him and to become GBC of India. Nobody wanted to be a GBC. GBC is Governing Body Commission member of India. Because India was such a problematic area, nobody was responding to the preaching, nobody wanted to give their children for this movement and so on. And he knew, and Prabhupada knew very well that Tamal Krishna Goswami is not going to agree. So what he did was he called Tamal Krishna Maharaj and said, he kind of created a kind of casual mood and said something to the effect of, I think, it is for your own purification, you should get married. So I think Tamal Krishna Maharaj outright refused and said, I've never asked you for any such, I have no interest. This went on for some time. And once he had finished spending all his indignation and Tamal Krishna Maharaj and his opposition to it, he said, well, then at least you should go to India and be Governing Body Commission member. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj straight away fell into that trap, because he had already lost all the steam to again oppose and challenge Prabhupada. So Prabhupada would sometimes do these kind of things. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj came and became Governing Body and he member, and he developed Mayapur in a big way and so on. Now the circumstances in which he died, he was only in his late 50s, no, maybe he was a little older than that, around the time I joined. And he was all set to be the first, you can say, the vice chancellor or the principal of the first university Mayapur was going to have. He was the obvious choice, because in between he took leave from ISKCON and wrote a thesis on Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and how he is viewed and so on, some such Gaudiya Vaishnava topic. There also he was a path breaker, because normally ISKCON sannyasis don't bother to get into regular academics and get a thesis, a PhD or anything awarded. But he broke all those rules and did it. It was controversial. His disciples felt neglected, felt they weren't getting his time. That's different. Anyway, so he was the obvious choice. But Krishna obviously willed very differently, because he was traveling to the airport early morning. Now, this is the key bit. Most of these people who are practicing seriously, or even at our ordinary level, we try, when we are going on long journeys, we try as much as possible here and there to make some contact with devotees, you know, just for our safety. We do not know in what circumstances we are going to find ourselves. So Maharaj could naturally, they booked a car for him. There was a driver who could have gone alone. He insisted that one of his disciples, and that was a grihastha, a married man, and his wife travel with him. I'm not sure that they were actually going on a flight. Also, he was going to fly to Delhi and then somewhere. The car went and hit a tree and he died on the spot. This was Krishna's plan. The car, it was foggy winter in Bengal, and early morning flight. The driver either was too tired or whatever. It was an ordinary Indian taxi car. It hit the tree and he took a hit on the forehead and he died on the spot. I think his disciples very much survived. But the point is, till the moment that happened, they were busy talking some Krishna conscious plan. May not specifically have been Bhagavad Gita or Bhagavatam, but some new project, something new for the pleasure of Srila Prabhupada. So these kind of practical tips, you know, people try, if they're going on a journey, they post somewhere and someone may come to the railway station or bring you a packet of food, what they call prasadam, something, some connection. So it keeps our consciousness safe from the kind of Maya world we live in, where there is so much sinfulness and, you know, offense and so on. This is Tamal Krishna Maharaj's death, because we really don't know how things are planned for anyone. On the contrary, last time I was telling you about a lady who died young and saw Tulasi at the end. You know, if you Google, you will see her name was Rudrani, Rudrani, and she got
Yeah,
married.
yeah, yeah. She,
Yeah,
she was, I think she worshipped Tulsi.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Was that?
Yeah,
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 okay.
yeah.
Now she,
She
yeah,
very
yeah.
seriously took to Tulsi worship, and in that cold climate, protected and so on. But she was cursed by a kind of chronic or juvenile arthritis from a young age, slim lady. When she came for treatment along with a whole lot of other ISKCON devotees to Kerala, she met and married a member of the Kottakkal warrior family. He became an ISKCON devotee. He also got initiated. He went back to Canada with her. As his actual Karmi name was, his legal name was Sukumaran warrior or something. Anyway, so she tolerated a lot of pain in her body, and eventually it became clear that it was going to take her life. And I think while still in her 40s, she passed away. But she's the one who, at the end, husband was by her side, other devotees were by their side, where they were propping her up and trying to soothe her pain and everything. And suddenly she just sat up and said, Tulasi Rani has come for me, I have to go, and just died like that. So it's all kinds of extraordinary arrangements are made by the Lord, and we don't know unless we ourselves die what is in store for us. But from our side, to make the whole experience as rewarding, eternally rewarding, and as thrilling, if you like, to see that also as something that brings us closer to God, and to remove the fear that stays in our mind. The thing to do, like you said, is to ma manusmara yudhyacha, that is to remember Krishna in whatever you do, so that you remember him right through the day or most of the time, and certainly when death comes in old age or whenever it comes, that you definitely remember him. So in verse 3, Krishna has begun to answer his questions, Arjuna's questions. And just one key word here, there's a word, the third verse, if you see the Sanskrit, it says Aksharam Brahma Paramam. Akshara, the first word. Okay, yeah. Just remember Akshara. Akshara means something that is not, it is not possible to destroy at all. Shara,
Indestructible.
indestructible. Kshara means something that has a tendency to get destroyed, harmed, broken, injured. So clearly Akshara is referring to spiritual and Kshara is referring to material. So therefore, here the Supreme Personality of Godhead is answering the indestructible transcendental living entity is called Brahman, and his eternal nature, that means spiritual nature, is called Adhyatma, the self. There's a difference here because ordinary nature that we have, material nature, is Swabhav and it can change. For example, in someone who may have the nature of a Brahman that is more inclined towards teaching, studying, if he wastes his opportunities, does lots of sinful activities, in the next birth that nature may change and he may get the nature and circumstances of a menial slave or like a Shudra existence. The reverse can also happen. So that material nature that we have in each body is something that can be changed even within one lifetime. Somebody who's living really at the bottom rung of society, doing only misguided sinful things, comes under good advice and good hears these classes and takes up a good practice, can get catapulted or elevated over some years of practice into a clean Brahmanical lifestyle, regulated, interested in studying, learning, sharing. It's so different from the, so that is something that changes. That's a material nature, that's Swabhav. But Adhyatma is not like that. Adhyatma means that eternal spiritual nature that we come to know once we go back and are what's called Swarup. Little high topics to discuss here, but a Swarup means when as a person really gets to the goal, is revealed to him what his Swarup or his eternal nature is in the spiritual world, what is his service, what is his relationship with the Lord. Is he one of the cowherds? Is he going to be in a parental affectionate mood? Is he one of the conjugal spouses of the Lord? So that is Adhyatma. At this stage, Krishna is just giving answers to Arjuna. Here, Brahman is indestructible, and in the purport, Brahman is indestructible and eternally existing, and his constitution is not changed at any time. But then, beyond Brahman, there is Para-Brahman, like your interaction with your friend. Brahman refers to the living entity, and the Para-Brahman refers to the Lord, Supreme Lord. Both are spiritual, but of course, there's a huge difference. The constitutional position of the living entity is different from the position he takes in the material world. A material consciousness, his nature is to try to lord it over, to be the lord of matter, to exploit those who are weaker than him. But in spiritual consciousness, his position is to serve the Supreme. He takes a lower position. When the living entity is in material consciousness, he has to take on various bodies. This is called karma, or varied creation by the force of material consciousness. Okay, now we are not going to go into the whole long purport, but just remember there is a tricky paragraph here which needs a little bit of explanation. Okay, before you read, I'm meaning that small paragraph which starts with the Chandogya Upanishad. Okay, before you read that, read from somewhere where you can see that those numerals, 84 lakh species, you can see, just start from that beginning of that sentence. Therefore, he's, no, in material nature.
Okay. In material nature, he may take a body from any of the 8 lakh,
84 lakh.
84 lakhs or 84 lakh species of life. But in spiritual nature, he has only one body. In material nature, he is manifested sometimes as a man, demigod, animal, beast, bird, etc., according to his karma. To attain material heavenly planets and enjoy their facilities, he sometimes performs sacrifice. Yagna. But when his merit is exhausted, he returns to earth again in the form of a man. This process is called karma.
Okay, so now the next one is, because remember Arjuna asked a question, who is the Lord of sacrifice? I think the Sanskrit term was Adi Yagya, who is the root or the Lord of all, Adi Yagya, Lord of all sacrifices, and of course it is the Supreme Lord himself. But sacrifice does not mean just, of course, at one level it means some physical action. Like there is a fire, there is a sacrificial fire, and you put things. That is a sacrifice. You throw bananas, you throw ghee into it. People keep, the priest, the purohit keeps pouring ghee. That's at one level, it's true. But sacrifice is also a concept. It means where you Technically, yajna means something that basically pleases the Lord. Now, in order to do something that pleases the Lord, invariably you are going to give up something that pleases yourself. Because in a conditioned state, the two are completely opposite or contradictory. We like to take it easy. The Lord is saying we have to be regulated and chant something so many. So like that is why yajna really means to please the Lord, for the pleasure of the Lord. So and therefore he is Adi Yajna, Supreme Lord. But to extend the meaning of the sacrifice, you see here, if you read the Chandogya Upanishad, yeah.
Yeah, the Chandogya Upanishad describes the Vedic sacrificial process. On a sacrificial altar, five kinds of offerings are made into the five kinds of fire. The five kinds of fire are conceived of as the heavenly planets, clouds, the earth, man, and woman. And the five kinds of sacrificial offerings are faith, the enjoyer on the moon, rain, grains, and semen.
Okay. Now here, if you just correlate each of these, someone who wants to go to the heavenly planets, what does he have to do? He has to invest some faith and some practice to basically go to the heavenly planets, to desire and to do different sacrifices to be able to go there. So that is also a type of sacrifice. What is the sacrificial offering in this case? It is faith. What faith? Basically some faith that it is great to go to the heavenly planets. It's a very prestigious position. He can enjoy endlessly. He can drink somaras and live for 120 or I don't know how many years. Now next it says we have to correlate another kind of, it says the clouds, and the last sentence here says the enjoyer on the moon. I'm not exactly sure what that means. I can't make a connection. The next earth.
Is it okay?
Okay, I have to say that I've not been able to figure out the connection. But the earth and rain, like when it rains, the earth, what does it show up? Earth produces so much grain and so on. So the rain is something that comes down from the top and is poured into the sacrificial altar of the earth, and it gives certain results. Man and woman, rain and grain. All right, because then the earth produces grains. What do you do with the grain? People eat the grain and develop their bodies. And what is the body for? If it is for the service of the Lord, eating itself becomes a kind of sacrifice to please the Lord, especially if you come to a platform or circumstances where we are able to eat food that has been first sanctified by being offered to the Lord. Therefore, or at least with consciousness that all this is the bounty of the Lord. He is giving the rain, He is giving the earth and the seeds, and therefore there is so much variety in what we can eat. So there again, the grains are also seen as a sacrifice because they put into our body. If you see the body as a sacrificial fire, we put the grains in, body becomes healthy, gets energy, can do services for the Lord or can meditate on the Lord. And semen here and the man and woman, if you see semen as a sacrificial offering, or the process of producing a child with the intention, like we described last time in an earlier class, with the intention of producing a child that is in good consciousness and it is going to serve the Lord, then even putting the semen inside the woman's body to bring about this reproduction, that can also be done as a yajna or in the mentality of consciousness or to please the Lord. So really the Upanishads and the Vedic scriptures tell us this element of sacrifice is the key to spiritual life. And normally in modern generation, if you say sacrifice, they'll pull a long face because it's an ugly word. The more modern slogan is all about you like it, you do it. Where is the question of sacrifice? Sacrifice often means that even if you like something, you don't do it.
There's this in the Wisdom of the Sages. I listened to the Wisdom of the Sages podcast. No? So they said the same thing. What you said, like you said, sacrifice in this world, like right now, it's kind of a dirt. It's used as a very dirty word, like
That's right.
sacrifice. Like, but
Unpopular.
in like when they're reading the Bhagavatam, whenever that word comes, instead of sacrifice, they just say ceremony. That's all. When they're when they're talking about the Bhagavatam, like they just say something like ceremony or something like that, and then they
Okay.
just replace the word sacrifice with the word ceremony. So
Okay.
if there's something about a sacrificial process, they say a
Ceremony.
ceremonial process, or if there's a sacrifice, they say ceremony that happened in this. So because a lot of the olden like sort of before the Kali Yuga, people had the ability to perform sacrifices because they had the they had the ability, the environment was suited for that time for them to be able to like some, because in the
Correct,
Bhagavatam
correct.
initially like there's mentions of horse sacrifice and things like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Now
yeah.
obviously nobody can do a horse sacrifice because nobody's in the mode of, the world is not in not in in that spirit of goodness where that kind of a sacrifice you offer, you will get something back. It's like you do
Correct.
something that there's no difference than you killing another animal basically.
Okay,
In
just
that
one
time
thing.
you, yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
please go on.
just remember, horse sacrifice doesn't mean you kill the horse. The Ashwamedha
Then what is
Yagya,
it?
Ashwamedha Yagya was undertaken by kings. They would basically, like a challenge to other kings, let a horse wander, set out very ceremonially. The horse will go where it pleases. Mind you, there is no man going along with the horse. Someone keeps an eye at some distance off. If the horse, supposing, sets off from, you let it loose into,
Oh, okay.
let's say,
So wherever it goes, that much distance of land that king will take. That's what
absolutely,
he conquers.
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. The owner
Okay.
of that next kingdom has to surrender. It's understood, surrender, or else they have to offer a fight and get defeated. So that was the Ashwamedha Yagya. But you're right to point this out. The sacrifice, even has all these horrible connotations, goats being slaughtered and
No, because
daughters being
there's
killed
also
and
that thing of a widow woman
sati,
jumping into
sati.
the fire,
I
sati.
understand.
That that
Horrible.
also is there, which is like not obviously not a good thing. But then like when you listen to like the story of Daksha, and when like Sati jumps into the fire, for Shiva, like because he insulted Shiva,
Voluntarily,
um,
yeah.
voluntarily. Now in this age, like no woman is going to actually do something like that for her husband. Like definitely
100%.
not in this age.
I
No
agree
woman's going
fully.
to do something like that. Like it's not going to
I
happen. And
I agree
no,
fully. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, and no woman should actually do that. But like it's what when
I
it's
agree.
written like that, you're like it's a little weird. Like when you see that, it's a little bit like okay, what does that mean exactly? And then like you're like who will actually but then at the same time, they're describing a world where the entire world was so pure. And like, it's like you're describing a time before Kali Yuga. Maybe it's like Sattva Yuga or something like that. At that stage, the beginning parts or Treta Yuga sometime. Then when they're describing a time or, beginning of creation or whatever that time was that they're describing, the whole, everything was so pure. It was so certain goodness that, you know, doing something bad was so rare, like that if you did there was such a high standard when it came to like how you led your life, how whether it be righteousness, something like that. That level of standard that they're describing in that part is not there right now. Now
Okay.
people are all into like all kinds of horrible things. So now in today's world, if somebody does something good, people are like, wow, this person did something good. In those
Mm,
times, like doing something good is a very normal thing. If you did something bad, you're like, oh, you did something bad. Now it's like doing something bad is like almost very normal. Like people do bad
yes.
things all the time.
Correct,
And
correct.
when somebody does something good, it's a surprise. Like, oh, this person did this. Wow, that's so amazing. It's like the opposite basically. Like,
Absolutely. Yeah. Can you hear what I'm saying? Am I audible?
yeah,
Can you
yeah,
hear?
yeah, 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 yeah. Go ahead, go ahead.
All right. No, because
Just
this thing about the Daksha Yagya, sorry, about Sati throwing herself in, what we have to understand is, and I can try and give a example closer to us in time because it involved two of my friends to try and for us to capture our defective, like you correctly said, everything is the opposite of what it should be now. So Sati throwing herself into the fire, it is. Like out of such a burning love and devotion for her spouse. Okay, that's rare. Firstly, I mean, nowadays uh, it's very rare to find a spouse, a man or woman who's worth dying for because we are all full of faults and ignorance and sham. We most of
actually
the time.
now most of the marriages now are mostly like it's mostly like a business kind of it's a mostly a business transaction that people get into. Like they get into marriage because they know this person has money, so then they get married to this person, and then after that, like that you're not like nowadays, like to be honest, like nobody's getting married to the other person because this person is like a nice person. I mean, that is there, but that's like people are
So
getting
many
married because this
other
person some yeah, they're coming from a good family, they got good money, and that's the reason why they're marrying this person. And like they get into all kinds of problems later on because they don't realize that what is more important is to figure out whether this person is a nice person. Like a woman would never marry a man now if he came from a poor family, even if he was a nice person. And a
correct.
man would never marry a woman if she also didn't come from a good family and she didn't have some money and she didn't have this. So most people are like getting married for these reasons. They're not getting married for
100%.
uh, any other reason
100%.
that they
So
love the person or anything.
So where is the question? But just to give you some a small dot, you can say of this, what Sati did by throwing herself into the fire. The just to give you that sentiment, there was a couple around the time I joined ISKCON. They were from Bombay, but originally Kannadiga or something. He was actually in the Indian excise department or account service. I'm not sure. His wife was a lawyer, and she looked very much like, like a small child. She wasn't too much into any normal womanly guy tricks or anything. Anyway, they were close to each other. He was very responsible. He was entrusted with an important position in the Vrindavan ISKCON temple by his guru Radhanath Swami.
Hmm.
Some
Oh.
he had when he had come to Mayapur to do the course that I was doing. He must have been in his late 30s at that time. That's right, and his wife also. They didn't have children, and he brought his elderly parents because they were his responsibility, and he set them in a. And I remember there was a feast, and there was a very nice one afternoon. I'll always remember. Now, unfortunately, few years later, maybe when he was only in his early 40s, still doing what his Guru Radhanath Swami had told him to do in the Vrindavan temple, balancing out or taking leave from his government position and job, and he dropped dead. He was sent to Delhi in some legal case, and he was walking on the road in Delhi, and he just dropped dead. And it was a terrible test for the wife. I met her later, and it immediately, of course, apart from the immediate horror of it, because a man who went in the morning from Vrindavan to Delhi and said, I'll be back in the evening, three policemen came and asked the wife, are you the wife of so and so? We have brought his body. No, nothing can be worse. There are no children, there were no other elders there. I don't know this young girl. I am trying to get her name. His name was Shama Krishna. That was a Diksha name, but I'm trying to remember her name. Anyway, I don't know whether she fainted or what happened. They Because he had been doing so much service and doing so much sacrifice as called by his guru, they took his body 3 times around the altar inside the temple. That is something that's done in ISKCON. Normally, a dead body is considered impure. You don't allow it. House is contaminated
Hmm.
because a dead body has gone out of the house. But in ISKCON, because it's the body of a Vaishnava who has given his life serving, or her life, it is brought for circumambulating the temple itself, or in this case, inside the temple around the altar, because there is a little alleyway around which you can walk past every ISKCON altar. It is part of the Pradakshina. Anyway, different things happened. She was in straight shell shock. He was cremated. All of ISKCON, I came to know a few days later. I met her 1 year later, and she was half herself, and we all knew. I'm not getting the name. Sundari Priya was her name. He was Shama Krishna, she was Sundari Priya. And we said, how is she going to stay alive? I mean, it was not a great romance or anything. He hardly had any time because he was so busy, but she was utterly devoted and dependent on him. And some of us used to even scold her and say, what is this? You're like you have to grow up and you have to understand he has so much burden on his. One day you will be a mother, you have to grow up a little and all. But that didn't make any sense to her. And she was, mind you, a lawyer in the court in Bombay. So I met her 1 year later, and she suddenly came. She had cut her hair short. She came and stood in front of me, and I was staring at her. And she says, Supriya, do you remember me? I am Shama Krishna's wife. So suddenly I jumped up. It was in the temple hall, and I said, "How are you?" She talked very calmly. She told me everything, and she said, "Supriya, maximum 2 years I will stay alive after he dies." And we said, "No, you mustn't talk like that." Now, meanwhile, she had herself told me her guru, Radhana Swami, sensing her plight, broke all the rules of normal brahmachari rules inside the Chaupati temple, gave her a room there, okay, put her inside the temple because he knew she's going to go to pieces. And in some way, the guru felt very responsible for maybe having overloaded Shamakrishna with the legal work and therefore lack of sleep and lack of regular food, which may have brought on the heart attack. We don't know, but I think he did feel something like that. He also knew the caliber of this wife, that she is not going to survive if she's just asked to stay with her in-laws or stay just as a lawyer with her own parents. So he broke all regular rules. He did something very unusual. I put her in a room. Of course, there are 3-4 rooms only in the ISKCON Chaupati temple which serve as a guest room for certain guests who come. There is no proper guest house there. The guest house is in the Juhu temple. That's different. Because Chaupati, there's no space. In a small area, they have done wonderful things. They can't expand. There's no space there. Anyway, this girl had a, and all the brahmacharis were told any time of the day, night, she needs anything, they should help her and they should immediately call Radhana Swami directly wherever he may be. And the girl also had her. Few years later, a student came to me called Charu Kapoor from Delhi side, and she was again a disciple of Radhana. So I mean, I casually asked, "How is Sundari Priya now?" She says, "You didn't know? She died." So I said, "How do you mean? You mean she committed suicide?" "No, no." And I said, "Then what? She had cancer?" "No, no. She just died." I said, "What do you mean? How can someone young who is barely, the man was 40 plus, she was in her 30s, how can somebody just die? You mean she fasted, refused to eat?" She says, "No. She just wasted away in separation and she died." Now, all of us feared this would happen. You know, nowadays, in today's day and age, nobody dies like that out of love and devotion to a spouse who has gone. You know, you hear all these cinema, filmy versions, great love. There was a musician who died in a road accident. The baby who was born after 20 years of prayer also died. It was a Malayali or Tamil, but they all
Yeah.
survive. Nobody dies like that, you know. But this is a classic case. We all suspected this exactly what would happen to her. And the guru clearly tried. It is not as if he was handsome. It is not as if she was a great beauty. It is not as if she was enamored of him because he was where. Not at all. He had some snub, blunt features, fairish. This Kannada kind of balding already, but very decent with my mother who was there at that time when I was doing the course. So this, I'm just trying to tell you, it was like a little bit of that wasting away out of love. I think something like this is what we are meant to understand, that ideally, if the man is so such a gem and the wife just can't bear the separation, she throws herself in the fire, and the grief is so much greater than the burning sensation of the fire.
Hmm.
This is what we are supposed to take away from it. Like you correctly said, it is unsupportable now. Unsupportable. This kind of stuff you can't in any way justify in today's world. The climate is wrong. The people are not made of that substance, and to just put unwilling women through that horror, it's horrible. It is what happens in certain parts of India. And as far as
Yeah.
animals are, yeah, go on.
Because like these things happen. It's still happening across India and many places. People are like women are like especially maybe in
Suppressed
northern
and
India. Where,
suppressed. Yeah.
yeah, especially in northern India, where people like women who are in villages are like the husband dies and the woman has to like just jump on the funeral pyre and she also has to like commit suicide. Like she has to basically commit suicide and it's a horrible thing. I mean, if
Horrible,
you think
horrible,
about it,
horrible.
because
Absolutely.
it's like see even if even if you think about a time when even if you think about like even in this the story of Daksha and that even in that time also um, even if the world was all good, the standard of the goodness is so high that you had to like that it was so like, you had to commit such an act to showcase how bad, like how, what the standard was and all that. Even then, I don't think it's the right thing to do. I personally, I don't think it's a good. I don't think it's a. I don't. I mean, I
It's a
don't
waste of
necessarily
life.
agree, but I can understand. But I don't necessarily like because
I
I don't think any woman should or any person should actually like
I
sacrifice
agree.
themselves in any
It's a
kind of process. Yeah.
waste of a life. And other thing is, in when we're talking about scripture, they were so clearly schooled in the understanding that there is going to be reincarnation, another life, another
Hmm.
life. So
Hmm.
it is like Kulashekar Alvar saying, "Let me die now." By today's standards, we will think he's mad. He's in good health. Why is he talking about wanting to die now? Because uh, our generation or our times, modern times, if you like, secular times, we don't really, it's so it is like Greek and Latin to accept that there is many lifetimes, there is rebirth. One life, okay, it got cut short at the age of 25 or 22 or whatever. Never mind, the person has gone, they will start again and complete this logic. Nobody buys it. That is why anything connected with death and a short life, or even death in a long, at the end of a long life, is also difficult for people to accept, because they think there is nothing beyond this. So just hang on and drag on as long as possible. As far as animal sacrifices are concerned, I've been told repeatedly, I haven't been to Nepal, that in the Kamakshi temple, I am not sure, I hope I've got it right, there is even today a system of goat slaughter. And my friend who went from here, some devotees who had been to Nepal, is it Nepal or is it, I think it is Nepal or Assam. Is it? No, not Assam. Guwahati?
Uh,
Guwahati.
Guwahati is Assam.
I know, but where is the Kamakshi? Kamakhya temple is in Assam. It's not in Nepal. It's in Assam, I think, Guwahati.
Okay,
I'm not
then I
sure. You
didn't.
have to check it up. But that this,
Kamakshi.
yeah, that they have this horrible bloody scene where as you're praying there is blood and slaughter everywhere. Kamakshi temple, yeah. Not Kanchi Kamakshi. Kamakya temple. No. Kamakshi Amman this is South India, but Kamakya is the Bengali Assam. Kamakya, Kamakshi. Just type Assam.
Komokya.
Yeah. They pronounce the Bengali.
Okay.
Okay.
Kamakya. This is the thing.
Okay.
Kamakya Nilachalai Hills.
Oh, where is that?
This one.
Okay, I suppose it's just one. I'm not sure. I'll just double check after the class. But that there is this horrible, uh, what is it, a Shiva temple? No, it can't be a Shiva temple. It has to be to this Kali form, Devi Kali form. There is this horrible goat slaughtering that goes on, and even while you're praying, you see on the slide, the on the side, the entrails of the goat and the blood and the all
Hmm.
this rubbish. So it's a very disturbing, you can say, it's something that stayed on from the past. But one thing I was very pleased to find, 20 years ago when my brother passed away, and as per his wishes, we went to Rameshwaram. And
This
because,
thing. What you said. This is
yeah.
this slightly
Oh,
gruesome picture
what?
of.
Yeah, gruesome.
Of
That's right. All the blood and stuff. Correct.
yeah.
Okay, that's the place. That's right. Okay. And my friend who went there, who's a ISKCON devotee, was saying, how can we even concentrate and pray when all this blood and gore is there? It's so disturbing. But what I saw, how either people adapt or acharyas change the system, and Madhavacharya made a big change and put an end to animal sacrifices. And instead, what they do, it's quite nice how they do it. Like I told you, because my brother was initiated in the Madhava line, his guru was a Madhva follower. Therefore, he requested when he was dying that he wants the last rites to be done in Rameshwaram, but by the Madhva group there. So my mother and I, we had gone there, and what I found was there was a fire, and they made with atta, maida or atta, dough. They made shapes of little goats and bull and cow, and not cow, but horse or whatever, they really pinched the ears, and we were asking what they. This is like a virtual sacrifice, not virtual meaning, yeah, it is virtually like a sacrifice, because they would take these little atta forms and say some mantras and throw them into the fire. So this is a very, very neat and clean upgradation of a horrible custom which at one time might have had. Originally, the idea behind animal sacrifice was that if it's done by a thoroughly pure priest who perfectly knows how to say the mantras, that creature immediately gets a human birth. That was the whole idea. That was the logic behind, not as it's done today by rapacious, greedy, money greedy priests, where just an old custom which is horrible and cruel carries on. And there is no guarantee that the poor creatures, apart from suffering a lot when they are slaughtered, actually get another human birth or whatever birth. But Madhavacharya introduced this change and he kind of upgraded at some stage. And so now in their system, they have to stick to what the Vedas say, which is this sacrifice as part of that particular puja. What they do is they make these animal figurines with atta quickly there itself, and they sprinkle holy water and sanctify and then throw it into the fire. So it just gets baked and destroyed. So there are different ways in Sampradayas, changes are made according to time, place, and circumstance to upgrade, and so that it's not just a dead, empty, hollow ritual that is left, which puts off people who are seeking for some genuine faith.
Okay.
Okay.
So that's good, but hopefully that changes anywhere, like wherever the sacrifices happen across India, like hopefully they stop doing that and they focus on like
But see,
the focus on Krishna, like just make Krishna the main thing, everything will be fine.
you saw a simple thing like stopping, what is that in Karnataka? Bull baiting, bullfighting, kakkada.
Bullfighting. Yeah, is there in Kerala also? I think is there.
Is it
Like in Kerala, yeah, is there in Kerala like I know Kerala. It's like I mean, it's the bull racing, no? Like in Tamil Nadu, it's what is it called?
It
Jallikattu.
has catchy
Jallikattu.
name. That's right.
Jallikattu. Yeah.
But is it just bull racing? I think, is it just, why in Spain there is bullfighting? I mean,
Yeah, yeah. No, that similar thing that in Tamil Nadu, in Karnataka, I don't know if they have the same thing, but I know that there's this thing in Karnataka and Kerala where they have this thing like bull racing thing, where like there'll be like
play,
two
mud,
like
mud. No.
yeah, there'll be like two, like I don't know how many, but there'll be like a bunch of bulls. Behind the bull, there'll be like a slate. So there'll be a person sitting on the slate behind the bull, and the bull will just go. And then like whoever is like whichever bull is faster, that person wins. It's like horse racing, like that.
So why is it
So
considered cruel? Why is it then considered
I
cruel?
think I think I think the other I think they're talking about Jallikattu in Tamil Nadu
Jallikattu.
in that
What?
Jallikattu is the same thing as the Spain bull thing. It's the same thing. So
Oh,
all these people, what they'll do is like there'll be one bull and everybody's trying to catch that one bull.
I
So
see.
it's like the bull is like it's
Taunted. Taunt the
yeah,
animal.
taunted.
Taunt
Like
and
they'll try to catch its back. They'll try to sting, and the bull is trying to just be free, and they're trying to catch it. So in Tamil Nadu, this happens. And then there's a controversy. Like people are saying, like why are they doing this? Like why are they harming the bull and why are they doing all this thing? It's such a cruel thing. And there's a Malayalam movie also made
uh-huh.
on that. It's
I
called
see.
Jallikattu.
I see.
It's a yeah, supposed to be a very good movie. Like it's made on this idea, like of this village group of people in somewhere in Kerala where there's this wild bull that's just causing a rampage and everybody's just scared.
Uh-huh.
So there's a movie. It's called Jallikattu. It's a
I see.
Malayalam movie also.
I
Yeah.
must look it up. I wasn't aware. I guess every culture and every country has its cross to bear. Like in England, the upper class, the aristocrats, they go. I think it's fox hunting. I'm not sure. They all get into all this.
Everywhere. there's like I think in some countries they have this in I don't know in Southeast Asian countries and all that or South American countries they have this thing called like they call it cockfighting or chicken fighting
Ah,
where
uh-huh.
they'll be like these chickens will be like in this they'll be like they'll do gambling bets and all that. Like, there'll be two chickens will
Right,
fight.
right.
Then people will
Cockfights.
put money on which cock or which chicken would win and like that. So there's all kinds of horrible things going on in the world.
Correct, yeah. So
Yeah.
we barely this today's class because we've been going on for 2 hours now. It's 6 o'clock, so we should end now. We barely got up to verse 4 or verse 5.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Usually happens whenever we are discussing chapters.
Okay.
The
All right. So verse 5, we will do it in the next class. We'll start from about
yeah,
verse,
sure.
yeah, 5 and 6 are the crucial verses,
Yeah,
attaining the
yeah,
Supreme and Antakali and all that. All right. So
yeah,
we'll
sure.
stop the recording now and
We,
carry.
we'll stop here. So I'll just end the
Thank
recording.
you.